Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at the new general that was just released, Theodosius. Now, first we're going to look at his uses as a main general, then his uses as an assistant general, just get an overview of how he works as a general as a whole, and then I have a question from a viewer about Theodosius, and also about the free generals, specifically with the compatibility of dragons. So once we've covered Theodosius, I'm going to answer those questions. Uh, yeah, so I guess let's just get right into it. So first off, with Theodosius, um, the basic ability isn't horrible, isn't super great. No HP or march size. Wait, no, he does have march size. That means it is a pretty strong basic ability, actually, since he does have march size. So as a base general, that's pretty good. That also is hopeful for compatibility as assistants. Once you max him out for the full 5 red stars, his attack is a little bit low compared to the others. Not horrible. Defense is pretty reasonable. Pretty high overall. Second, his HP, he gets 30 HP, so pretty poor HP, and his overall march size is pretty decent, putting him on the higher end of the spectrum. Speaking about his specialty, he gets a bit of attack from his specialty. Defense is pretty nice for the specialty as well. HP is pretty decent. No march size for the specialty. His Covenant, pretty standard, 10% across the board. No march size, so that's going to hold him back a little bit. But nothing too crazy, pretty basic Covenant right there. Attributes, you probably don't really care about that too much, but here they are. One thing to know, his attack for his attributes is pretty high, which is interesting, but most people don't really care about that. For total attack, he comes in 4th place overall, so pretty respectable. His defense, he's second in defense, right behind Raimundo, so he is a pretty defensive general. However, on HP, he only comes in 4th place. Excuse me, I was looking at the wrong one. He comes in 8th place, so his HP is lacking a little bit. Overall, defensively, he's pretty decent on the defensive side. He's not the best. We can see that Gunther is by far a better defensive general than he is. And he's got a couple runners for his money. Uh, no, no, no cheap general on the defensive side, but he's not the best. So, you know, overall total march size, nothing too crazy about middle of the pack. The stat we're most interested in is the total increased attack. Now these ones are based off of this base size rally spot, this much burst buff, the attack for a, I believe that's a tier 12, 2000% buff. And with that set up, we can see that he comes in like 7th place overall for total effective damage. And I'm going to do a little break right now, and I'm going to recalibrate this for the tier 15 troops, so we can see how he does with tier 15s. Okay, we've recalibrated this. The previous one was calibrated for a K33, extra 1.5 million troops. It was based on the tier 11 siege with 2000% buff. Right now it's calibrated for a K40, extra 2.5 million march size, 2000% buffs, and tier 15 troops. Looking at that, it really doesn't change a whole lot in terms of his total effective damage, so nothing too crazy here. Overall, as a main general, it seems like they did a pretty decent job balancing him. He's not broken OP, he's not totally useless. He's overall a reasonably solid general, but if you already have a solid siege general fully maxed out, he's not worth investing in. Next up, let's look at his assistant spot. As we already covered the base, the specialty, the Covenant and Skin, all those things apply. Looking at the total attack as an assistant, pretty high attack for assistant role. Defensively, he has the highest defense, tied with Gunther. The HP is lacking a little bit. He's pretty far down, so pretty okay defensively. Not great, not terrible. March size on the defensive side, 8% for a siege general. That's pretty solid. Overall effective damage, and this one is, yes, it is also calibrated for the K40 Tier 15 March, but this one only has 2 million extra damage. Change that. There we go, 2.5 million. And the extra troops don't really change anything. It makes him slightly better than Cleos, but that's about it. So nothing too insane for Theodosius overall. Solid general as an assistant. There are better options, but he's pretty high ranking. With that covered for the basic overview of Theodosius, let's take a look at the question that I got. Now, the question comes from either Maurice or Mary's, I don't know, 8941, and they say, waiting for a new video about the Siege General Theodosius. 2 questions that I'd like to hear more about. Who is better as an assistant between Theo versus Cleos? Currently use Teach as a main because I can get copies of him with general invitations, but what would be the recommended free-to-play general without a dragon? And he's ruled out Ulysses because of the dragon. So, let's first discuss Theodosius and Cleos. Just right off the bat, they are very close together in terms of effective damage. The main difference you see is Cleos has a lower attack than Theodosius, but he has slightly higher march size. The HP and defense are very comparable. Nothing really deciding there, so they're very close in terms of who's going to be more effective. I would say if you have one already invested into, use whichever one you already have invested into. It's not worth changing it up for either one because they're just so close overall. If you have both of them at 0 skill, completely newt, then what you're going to want to look at is the difference between march size, and that's going to depend on what point you are in the game. If you're earlier in the game, like K35 and below, you're going to want to go for the higher attack and less for the march size because you're going to get more benefit out of the march size at a higher keep level because of your base rally spot. So for a lower level player, I would recommend Theodosius. If you're higher level, like K40 and above, I would probably recommend Cleos. So with that said, let's look at the other part. Who is going to be the best free-to-play general without a dragon? Now, these ones in orange are all free-to-play from the tavern. I highlighted Edward Teach, so we can track him better. Looking at this, we can see that Ulysses is at the top, but he's out of the question. Edward Teach and Quincy, they're pretty close in terms of damage overall. C has some march size. Edward Teach has 0% march size, so that's the main difference between these two. If I remember correctly, Quincy can't take the attack book, whereas Edward Teach can. I'll fact check that on the screen right now. In terms of survivability, Edward Teach is better. So it looks like, I think, despite these numbers being so close, I think that Edward Teach is probably the better of the two, just based on the survivability, the higher damage numbers, and you're already investing in him, so probably go with that. Now these other 2 generals down here are ones that I added that aren't siege generals, but they could be used as them. The first one is Genghis Khan, who has all the march size, and the second one is Gustavus Adolphus, who is built as a range/siege general, but also debuffs ranged and siege. Now he is an interesting choice because he gets to 32 billion, which is just 3 billion behind Edward Teach. He has the same march size as Edward. The attack is lower, defense and HP is lower, so I wouldn't really mention him at all, except he does debuff the enemy ranged and siege by 15% for HP and defense, so that's going to boost your attack a little bit. It really depends if you're already maxing out the enemy's debuffs with your sub-cities, then this probably is not going to matter, and definitely Edward Teach is the better option. But if you are struggling to fully debuff the enemy, then I could see a use where this might make it worth using him. Like I said, it really depends on where you're at in the game. Overall, I would say Edward Teach is probably the better general. And if you can't use Ulysses because of the dragon, Edward Teach is a good replacement. None of the other free-to-play generals are really that good. Quincy might be worth investing in with the little bit extra march size he gets over Edward Teach. If you get into like K40, I don't think you really see too much of a difference. But if you do get up near like K45, like super endgame, then that little bit of extra march size might make a difference. But if you're that late into the game, you're not using free generals anyway. So for most players, I would say Edward Teach. So to summarize the answer, if you're going to be free to play and you can't use Ulysses, Edward Teach is a solid option. For the assistant between Theo and Kleos, whichever one you already have and want to upgrade, if you're more of a late game player, Kleos is better. Early game, Theos is better. And yeah, that's all I have for this video. Hope y'all guys found this useful, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.